I recently just had the honor of speaking with Kris from Growth to Value, or the mentor of the great Potential Multi-Baggers Investing Group. We spoke about his Seeking Alpha articles covering Block Inc.'s short report by Hindenburg, as well as their subsequent responses. On March 23rd, Hindenburg issued a long short report on Block Inc., and the stock dropped by 15%, you wrote. What is your first thoughts about this short report? And yeah.
Well, my very first thought was actually, oh, damn. That was my very first thought, because Hindenburg is good. I respect Hindenburg. They have done great work overall. They have, really uncovered several frauds, and people who do that are a blessing for a stock market, because they take out the bad actors. So when I saw that Hindenburg wrote a short report about Block, I will not say that I was panicking, but it was, oh damn, this probably will be substantial, and this will mean a lot of work for me because I know that they write long reports. And then I started reading the content, and I was actually relieved to see that there were less substantial things than I had thought or feared. There were too many nothing burgers in there, and I think, and I will be straight from the start. Hindenburg even contacted me after I wrote my articles in a polite way, and I have to say that's an exception, because I have been contacted by short sellers before. I wrote an article on their short reports, and they were often very aggressive. I've even been threatened by one. I will not mention who it was, but it's a quite famous one. But Hindenburg was respectful, so kudos for that. And I told him as well. Well, told him, we chatted. I probably would have thought it was more substantial if there had not been such obvious weaknesses in the report. And I mean, that's why I made a distinction between the nothing burgers and the more substantial things to look at. I think that's a mistake that more short sellers make, that they want to have as much panic as possible to profit from. And that's why they use a certain language, tabloid-like. They drag in every negative aspect that they can probably think of, even if it's, something which actually brings down the strength of the case. One of those things was that the valuation of Square or Block was looked at on a tangible book value, which is crazy for a tech company. You know that nobody does that, and everybody who knows about stocks knows that this is BS. Another example is that he talked about lyrics in rap songs, which said that they committed crime through Cash App. Wow, rappers rapping about crime? Seriously?
Yeah.
I didn't know that happened, right? And he said, oh, and there's so many mentions of Cash App. It's not a coincidence. Well, I just looked at for 2 minutes on lyrics.com.
I have it here. You put about 660 lyrics just in Wells Fargo, about 185 of JP Morgan Chase,
Yeah.
Bank of America, another 650. And those are specifically for those, exact quotes, different references that potentially maybe they are saying, Chase Bank or one of these might pop up another,
Mhm. Yep.
couple hundred times or something along these things. One of the
Exactly. And,
lines
and that, that took me 2 minutes to Google, literally. Um,
yeah.
I also find it ridiculous. Maybe I shouldn't say that because I respect Hindenburg, but I still don't think you should do that. If you start your report with, "We have been working for 2 years on this report," well, maybe you started 2 years ago, but you have not worked on that report for 2 years. No way, because the last time that I looked, there were 5 people working at Hindenburg, and they have put out, in those 2 years, they have put out something like 20 short reports. If that would be true, and they have worked on that report for 2 years, they're lazy bums. So, and I know they're not.
I just wanted to butt into the video really quickly just to state that I am loving these conversations that I'm doing with these very smart individuals. And if you guys are also liking these longer formed content videos, make sure you guys like the video and subscribe down below if you want to see more financial content just like this. Let's jump back in. One of the funny quotes that I found in here, or actually, let me do two really quick. This is a quote from the article. A review of those songs, talking about Cash App, would show that those artists are not generally rapping about Cash App's smooth user interface, as if that's going to be in the rap songs. I thought was a funny line.
Yeah.
As well
that
as
was
the
good.
as well as the inclusion of a gang back in 2021 in Baltimore, named after Cash App.
Yeah, and that's of course Block's fault, right? I mean, those in the report, in Hindenburg's report, there's 122 times the word fraud. None of those references are about Block directly. They're all circling around Block, and it's just tactics to make Block look guilty by association. You can write about any company in that kind of language, and you know that people will be scared.
Yeah. So what do you think about, you had also wrote in your article talking about the differences between a great short report that is really pointing out some potential real fraud here versus the idea of just simple market manipulation and using, their power and influence in the markets, and having a couple great reports also just give them that reputation that once Hindenburg posts a study, that you have to sell that stock. Right? Do you think that there was any stock manipulation here? Do you think that Hindenburg fully believes that what they're reporting is on fraud, and that there is really a 75% potential for decline in this stock? Or what are your feelings about this?
It's always difficult to put yourself in someone else's, in someone else's shoes, but they have worked on this for quite a while, and they want a certain outcome, right? Because otherwise the work was useless. So it's better than to still go on, and even if it's weaker, to still publish it, profit from it. Because I also wrote in my article that Will Wisdom put out a big trade there, so probably they have made, what was it again, 5 million in the first quarter that the market was open, something like that.
Yeah, I don't know if it came out that it was Hindenburg.
No, it's that's not certain. So let me be clear.
But it was
there.
a 1,000 or 2,000% gain or something along these lines, based on a $500,000 trade that was placed or something.
Yep.
If I remember correctly.
It would be a coincidence that it would be someone else besides Hindenburg and one of their partners. Right. So and that's one of the things that I think that there should be some sort of disclosure, like in the report there is, we are short, okay, but how much, and how much does this influence the market? Because some of those short sellers have quite big customers, and they can move the market. You can put out a report without any truth, make millions, and get away with it. Is that fair? I don't know. Maybe there should be some sort of responsibility there. Like, your claims have been proven to be unsubstantial. You just have to give back the money that you made. Something like that. I don't know. The funny thing is that people are extremely black and white about short sales. They hate them, or they think they're heroes. And I'm somewhere in between. I think they're overall healthy for the system. As I said, Hindenburg has uncovered several frauds, but at the same time, there are aspects which should be done better. Let's put it that way.
I remember you writing about that in your article, talking about how you think that there should maybe be a chargeback if Block is able to prove that potentially there isn't actual fraud in their user counts or something like this. And we'll talk about that as well. You talking about the differences between transacting actives versus transacting users. But before we jump into those more serious claims, I'd like to just touch up on 3 more of these nothing burgers that you had brought up that might be, somewhere in the middle for people. So obviously the gangs and all these things, those are ones that I completely brushed off the second I read the article. What did you think about the actual insider selling shares?
Yeah, that always looks scary to people, right? Founders are selling shares. Well, two things. It was about Jack Dorsey, of course, and it was about McKelvey. So and they have sold for about $1 billion in shares, which is a lot, of course, and it sounds awful if you put it out like that. If you put it in context and you look at the stock price of Square at the time, still, I think it was, that was really high. So that means that if they sold those shares, the market price would. I made a calculation, and it's not fair as well, because I think the market top there or something like that. And I think that they sold together about 6% of their total holdings. Even if that's not fair, even if it's 10%, McKelvey is in the Fed right now of St. Louis. He's not involved with Block anymore, or not directly. That should be put in context. You're a financial advisor. You would be the first to say, you should diversify your holdings a little bit, and not just get everything in one stock.
Yeah,
And
right.
that's what a lot of executives also do, and they hear that constantly from their financial advisors, and that's why they sell stock. And Jack Dorsey still has a huge stake in Block. So
Just
without
to
knowing everything, it sounds really scary to say 1 billion sold. With the context, it's not that it's not that scary at all. It's quite normal.
So yeah, you had also written that Dorsey still owns about $3 billion in shares. McKelvey owns around.
At the current price. So that
That
was
was
at
a
the price.
15% drop.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that was it's more now.
Yeah, and then McKelvey owns around 800 million still from
Hmm.
that 15% drop from whenever this article was posted. The exact day, I think you had gotten those numbers on March 24th.
Hmm.
Um,
So it's not
but
that as if they don't have any skin in the game anymore, right?
Right, and then even now, as the stock is recovering, I think potentially closing, near $70 a share. At the time that they were selling this $1 billion worth of, stock was upwards of $200 plus in the stock price. So two very different valuations, and they still think from this point in the $70 plus range that it's going to drop another. I think they said a potential 50 to 75%.
Yeah.
But then there is actually one large concern. I don't know if it's a fraudulent concern, but just one that I'm not too much of a fan of: the Afterpay acquisition.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts about this acquisition? What are your thoughts about Hindenburg bringing up this part as a potential short reasoning or
I'm not going to say that Afterpay has been a great acquisition. I mean, but we don't know yet. I mean, the acquisition just closed in 2022. So yeah, we have no idea if this will be a good acquisition over time. And people always quote that the acquisition cost 29 billion, excuse me,
billion?
dollars. But that's not correct. That was correct at the time that the acquisition was announced, because it was an all stock deal, and that means that it was 29 billion. At the moment that the acquisition closed, it was something like 10 billion or so. So that's totally different. Yeah, the delinquencies are, that was one of the points that Hindenburg made, just from the top of my head, but I think they went up from 1.50 or 75% to 4%, something like that.
Yeah,
You have it there.
1.7 to 4.1.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you look all across the board, that's still very low. 4.1 in this environment is very low. So I think, again, this is not fair by leaving out the content. This is completely drawn out of context, and I think that Hindenburg knows that. 4.1% is not much delinquency, and credit cards, it's much higher. It's about double, if I remember well. So no.
Well, let's talk really quickly about also other things that might have been taken out of context. In a quote, Block reported a 1% year-over-year revenue decline and a GAAP loss of $540.7 million in 2022. You were pretty shocked by this writing. You said Hindenburg should know all too well that this is a Bitcoin, additive, and that if you're ever looking at, Block Incorporated, that you should look at it excluding Bitcoin, at least whenever you're looking at revenue.
Yeah, sure. Because so they are actually the transacting platform for people on Cash App who want to buy and to sell Bitcoin. But because it's on their balance sheet for even a millisecond, it has to be recognized as revenue, which is, actually quite, strange. Everybody knows that 2021 Bitcoin exploded and Bitcoin trading exploded. 2022, the reverse happened, of course, and of course that has influence on the revenue. Now, if you exclude Bitcoin, Block's revenue was up 26%, which was organically, I have to say, is very, very impressive. 36%, including Afterpay. So, I mean, to me, this is again, this is again scaring tactics, because Hindenburg knows this all too well, and that's one of the things that I think are a pity, because again, that's one of the things. If you leave that out or just be honest, the rest would be more credible as well.
Right. And so let's go into maybe a couple of their more credible allegations then. Inflated accounts.
Yeah.
They were saying that there is a ton more actual transacting active users. They actually use that in their article, but that's actually not what Block is stating. Maybe you can give us some more insight.
No, it's Block says that they have transactives full stop. Hindenburg uses the word users, which Block doesn't. So Hindenburg suggests that Block is lying about users, but they don't. And if you look at the 10K, it's even more laughable, because just above the graph that Hindenburg shows, this is not users. This is people could have multiple accounts. The other way around as well. Families can use the same account. Hindenburg makes this sound as if this is a fraud, but that's totally not the case, because Block clearly discloses this. And on top of that, is actually stricter in its definition, and that was pointed out in Block's response, is stricter in its definition than its competitors. Most of its competitors. Most of its competitors, any account is an account, and Block says no. The account has to be to be active in the last month, and then it's they use monthly active users, so which is indeed quite a bit stricter than overall accounts, which most others do, and Hindenburg probably used that today in their response to Block's response, because in Block's response they disclosed the real people behind, or an estimate of it. So the difference was about 7 million at the end of last year, and 13% of those 7 million people have already used their social security number to identify themselves in the current year, in 2023. So that leaves about 6 million people who have an account without any social security number or other form of identification, apart from the usual email address, etc. Now, Block pointed out that the people who have an identification are responsible for 97% of revenue. So those, 6 million are responsible for 3% of revenue, which already indicates that this is not the huge fraud that Hindenburg wants to make of it. I mean, if those unidentified, accounts only account for 3% of revenue, this is not, the place where all the criminals come together to use Cash App and have a blast. So
Right.
the numbers are quite clear there, and I thought that Block did a great job. They were open. If you know that you're right, you're open. That's my thesis. If you know that you're wrong, you attack the person. So and you often see that companies attacking the person. Block did none of that and disclosed quite a bit more than they usually disclose. For example, the real people behind those accounts or an estimate. So yeah, I think Block's response was very, very good. And Hindenburg again responded to that response today. They hammered about on the same nail again. The inflated users account. Oh, they have now they have said that it's true. Yeah, well,
Right,
they have
right.
always said that even before you pointed that out.
So let me ask you a question then. If you were able to take your, serious allegations column, knowing the response that Square has put out, how many of these serious allegations would you now categorize as nothing burgers now that Square has added some more light and more context into their user base?
Well, you have nothing burgers, and then I mean, there's nothing there. I mean, it's just air. um, and then you have the more serious allegations, and the user number. I put that in a more serious because I wanted to look at that. Now that Block has responded to that even more, it's a nothing burger to me as well because no one invests in Block for the user numbers, right? You invest in Block for revenue or gross profit or what have you, but not because of a certain user number of users. Hindenburg said, and that also means that their cost of acquisition is much higher than they report. Yeah, sort of, but at the same time, their cost of acquisition is so incredibly low. It was under $5. Compare that to a bank, it's more than $2,000 often.
They want to talk about the cost of acquisition being affected by, the percentage of real users, but then that would completely change the average revenue per user, which is the good side that they don't
Yep.
want to talk about.
Yeah.
If
Good
the
point.
if there's half of the real users, then the average revenue per user has just doubled, you know.
Yep.
Um,
Exactly. Exactly.
so the finances behind the company aren't changing regardless of how many users. And in fact, if there is that many less users, then that might even increase their total addressable market if they think that there's this much left of a user base to go after in the United States. So I think it was a little bit of a backfiring. Personally, like I think we're both shareholders of this company. Whenever this had originally happened, I felt bad for the people that sold, but I was able to get a couple shares whenever it was lower. Now we're looking at the
Yeah, then
stock.
that sorry that but we both have to thank Hindenburg for that. I bought some more as well. Not too much, but I added a little bit. So
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you, Nathan.
But you know what is that, like, now it's almost back to where it was. I think it's nearing $70 as of the time of recording this video. I should bring that up, but I think it was $73 whenever the report came out the night before. It's actually $69 right now. Yeah, so we're almost back to exactly where we were, where whenever we look at previous Hindenburg reports, this is actually usually not the case. You had actually pointed this out, that they have been quite successful in a lot of their reports. I think the Adani Group was probably the last, major one that had just happened that I think had blown a lot of people away, and it probably gave
Mhm.
the steam for why people reacted so strongly for Block. I mean, like you said,
Sure.
I was not excited to see Square on that list at all. But then after reading it, I calmed down a little bit and was actually able
I
to, get some couch money together.
Yep. I also think that they went a bit out of their, I would almost say comfort zone, but maybe zone of experience is a better word, or a better term, because it's the first time that they take on such a big American company. They have taken on Adani, which is big as well, but it's Indian. It's always possible that a big company is fraudulent as well. Remember Enron? But it's much more possible that a smaller company is fraudulent. So I think that they went a bit out of their league, and maybe they in the future they will do great work there. And then this was just their first step, and they needed this to grow as a company. Hindenburg, I don't know, but this was not up to the level of their other work.
So what about one of the most, I think, serious allegations, one that I think will come out to be proven to be correct, and they are probably right about it, and it is a little bit of a concern, but this is probably the interchange fees,
Yep.
where they had talked about how this is quite similar to PayPal, where they're kind of going around the Dodd-Frank Act, not dealing with these large banks that have $10 billion in assets under management, but the smaller players that have uncapped interchange fees. What kind of role do you think this will play? Do you think that this is a big regulatory issue? Do you think the idea of renting a charter the way they sort of are will be changed in total, or what do you think?
It's a good question, and the only honest answer I have is I don't know. There is a point there indeed about the interchange fees, and PayPal is being investigated right now by the SEC, and I think that as Block's shareholders, that's really something we should follow up, because if that's a big if already, if PayPal would be sued, yeah, sure, Block could be the next one. If you look at the fees, and I made a calculation, and I think that it would mean something like 5% or so, if if PayPal would be sued, and then they come to Block and they find the same, or they have the same findings, then I think there could be an impact of about 5% of their gross profits. That could be substantial for people who are more short-term oriented, because probably the stock will get another hit. But for me, I'm a long-term investor, and when I mean long-term, I'm really talking about 20 years plus or so. That almost sounds extreme these days, but that's how our grandfathers used to do it.
Now to go, because like I said, we're both bullish on this company in a way. So to counter that point and take this with all the bias that you will, but one of the greatest things that we didn't talk about during this call, that I thought you brought up perfectly, is that we're covering Cash App, which is not the whole company, right? This is 50% of their full business. And really what they're worried about is 50% of Cash App, which should be looked at as 25% or less than 25% of the business. And they're expecting a 75% decline in the stock value. This is maybe why people are starting to put their money back into the stock, is they're realizing, even if these concerns are legitimate, that maybe they're not as threatening as people once thought. I mean, we still have an amazing e-commerce business. Like you said, we still haven't seen the full impact of Afterpay and how that's going to develop. But I wonder, is there any other things that potentially you wanted to bring up for or against what they had to say in their short report? I know that you spoke with Hindenburg, but obviously I'm trying to defend the case that I like the stock with all the bias. Like, I want people to know that I am a shareholder, but defending my
Well,
stance in the company.
I have to say, it's something that I learned over time to take short reports serious. And full disclosure here, there was a short report about STEM a few months ago, and I read that, and I found it, very probable that it could be right. So I sold my position there. Just to say, I'm not against short reports in general. If this would have been a convincing short report, I might have sold or trimmed or what have you, but it was not. One of the other things that Hindenburg was pointing out was fraud on Cash App. Now, again, I thought that Block reacted to this very well in their response, saying, "Yeah, there is fraud on our platform." There's fraud on every financial platform. We do everything to regulate this, to minimize it as much as possible. And they go into some details there. They said that about 2.4% was marked as potentially dangerous or potentially fraudulent. So, but that's just marking. That's just a system that says you just have to look at this. They also said that no, it's not possible to open another account. I think Block was really good in saying, we know that there's fraud on our platform, and I thought that was a good answer, because you cannot deny that it's all over the place. And I mean, every bank has criminals as customers. That was also funny. They said that they had substantially more invested in fraud detection than their gross profit had grown in every year since 2019. And if I remember well, their gross profit was up. I don't remember exactly how much during the pandemic, but it was a lot. So they invested more. Now Hindenburg used that sentence today to say, you see, they are. Oh, maybe probably I should take the literal words. This is great language. As a next language teacher, I enjoy this because it's written in the most negative way possible. You almost feel sucked into the dark abyss. Block vaguely acknowledged how its own fraud expenses during the pandemic went up without specifying by how much. They invest so much more in fraud detection, and they say that, and then it's this sounds like it's scammy, and you can laugh with it now because the rest of the report was not convincing. But this is the kind of language that short sellers use. This is in every short report. I think their credibility would go up if they wouldn't do those kind of things.
Yeah, no, I think so too. And we touched on that from the start, that I think if they kept a lot of things out and they just said, you know what, we see a problem with what they're showing in terms of their customer base, their interchange fees is a huge deal. Some of their services with just offering, instant payouts as being, some of their larger models for how they're making money. I mean, all that doesn't look good, but filling all those gaps with all of the nonsense that they also said kind of tarnishes the entire short report, in my opinion. But I just want to say thanks to you, Kris, for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. And all of your links are down in the description. So everyone go check out Kris or From Growth to Value, covering Block, Amazon, C Limited, Fiverr. These are some of the ones that you just wrote articles just recently. CrowdStrike, Cloudflare, Adyen, all of these amazing companies that a lot of people I know are looking for a lot of research on right now, big retail stocks. I might have to actually talk with you again about some of these companies like Adyen, which I'm just starting to do a ton of research on, and you actually have a strong buy on it. So maybe we can have a follow-up on that later. But
pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate you on the show. And is there anything else you want to do, shout out or say before we go?
Yeah, there's a 2-week free trial for potential multi-baggers, so you can always join. And people are sometimes afraid to start it. You don't have to be afraid. Just literally 3 clicks and you're out. So don't think you're locked in.
Perfect. Thanks, Kris. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much. I enjoyed it.